Yes, just like the title says, I was broken into. Some of you who followed me through the years will recognize the outside of this house and also the inside. This is the rehab that I was doing, which I have temporarily, permanently put on hold for a while. For a lot of different reasons, which I won't go into. But I was broken into, and I will post the pictures, the couple that I took right now. So as you can see, that was a mess. I have a lot of the wood left over. You can see that's where the hinge was. This is the hinge side of the door. I don't know. Yeah, I think this is the lock side of the door. So when they busted it in, it literally just tore. Yeah, this is a hinge side too. It just literally tore. This is where the lock was. I think it's upside down. Nope. So this is where the top lock was, and this is where the bottom lock was, I think, or vice versa. Anyway, you can see what kind of damage it did. This is just pine. So one of the issues about doors, your door is only as strong as your bolt. And as you can tell, this is the original lock. I haven't done anything to the lock at all. This is the original bolt. It's not bent. It still functions the way it's supposed to. The bottom one isn't bent or damaged in any way. It still functions the way it's supposed to, but both of these are stronger than the pine that used to be here. And I was going to show how to do this, but I forgot. So I'm kind of showing after the fact. So basically what you have when you have a pre-hung door, which this is a weather strip, and this stuff actually comes out. There's a slot that feeds into. This is one by, probably by about 5 inches or so, and it goes up behind this jamb. So behind the jamb you can't get to. You would have to basically tear out the whole pre-hung portion and change that out, and it doesn't make any sense. So what you do is you pull this out, the weather strip in the slot that it sits in. Once you have that out, you figure out where your damage is at. In this case, it came down to here. So what I did is I cut out this portion of the door trim, as it were, and went to the top where that was damaged. Still a little bit of damage on the inside, and on the opposite side as well. You can tell where the damage was, all the way up, clear up to there, and almost down to the bottom. So it just messed up. It pulled out the screws that were in here. It just messed up the whole door when they kicked it in. Strangely enough, yes, it's dirty, but strangely enough, there's no dent. Again, the door is a steel door, and we have a steel lock and a bolt, and you're like, wow, that's a very secure door and a very secure lock. No, it's not, because again, it's only as strong as your wood, and the wood is weak. And so what I end up doing is I figure out the dimension from here to here, which I think was like 2 1/8. And so I rip a 1 by 2 1/8, and then I just scab it in where it stopped at, and where it stopped at up here. And the wood is a little bit thicker than this original wood, and you got to put shims in here. Obviously, you got to put shims in here to recess it out to the point that it needs to be. And then I come in here with a planer later and get that a little bit smoother. Then I put in some wood filler or some caulking, and then I paint it, and it's like it never even happened. So going backwards in time, when I repaired this, as I just explained how to do with the strip of wood, getting in here is probably the hardest part. So as I cut along here, I use a skill saw, and a combination of a skill saw and a Dremel, in order to get this old section out. Once this old section gets out, then this can be put in and set in and screwed in. So let me explain the screw process. So these are 3-inch drywall screws. The 3-inch drywall screws is what I'm using instead of nails. The nails are going to pop out if I had used even these longer finishing nails. If I had used these, they're still going to bend easy and they're going to pull out. Screws are a lot more durable. If you can get one thicker, that's great too, but these are 3-inch screws. So right behind every door you have a stud, and that stud is going to be your strongest part of your door jamb and your frame and all that stuff. This 2x4, there's actually a couple of them that sit in here. You can see the thickness of both of these before the light switch. So these screws actually go all the way in to the stud, probably a good 2 inches. And then this gets mortised out. This is recessed. And so these screws, there's plenty of them. You can tell 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And more specifically, this is where the deadbolt goes. So I have a screw here and a screw here, right up against the deadbolt. So instead of my wood being the weakest point of this whole lock system, these screws guarantee, and then also these are 3-inch screws too. So these screws are all going into that 2x4 behind it. It's going to be very, very difficult to bust out these screws along with the wood going forward. And then you can see this is kind of a quick job because I just noticed I got broken into last week and I haven't had time to fix it. So all I did is I get a spade bit and figure out where my line is at. That's pretty easy to do. Right where the bolt and right where my plunger go for my bottom lock, I just mark a little line. You see that line, and then I transfer that line onto the other side, and I know exactly where my hole is going to be drilled out. So I don't have a plate for that yet. I think it's on the ground here somewhere. I don't know, I think it's ruined. But I'll eventually get a plate for that plunger also. But I recovered the other plate and unbent it. It was all bent up, so I just knocked it back into a flat position. Anyway, what was I getting at? So that's how you align that. You figure out where that goes. To make it easier sometimes, if you have a difficulty finding out exactly where this stops at, even though you've lined it up with here, you can actually put some paint or even some white caulking on the end of here, kind of heavy, and then set it back like that, close it, and then turn it. And where you turn it at is going to be exactly where you're going to be drilling your hole. So that will mark it for you. I didn't go through all that process because I could eyeball it and know where to drill my hole at. And then you put your plate on here. Usually you recess this plate inside of here, but there's enough room here I didn't have to recess the plate. Same thing at the bottom. So when I get that strike plate for the bottom, I'll probably not recess it unless I have to. So basically same thing on this other side. I mortised out where the hinges go. I mortised out the best I could with a chisel. So the chisel doesn't get exactly perfect, but it gets the depth that you need for these hinges. So this one was already set in place, and so it became really easy for me to mark these other ones because all I had to do is put the door back up where it was and kind of float it on a shim over here, and then I can mark out exactly where my hinges go here, and then I use the chisel. As I said, that's not the easiest way to go with a chisel. If you had a router, that would be better, a little bit cleaner and smoother. But I didn't have access to a router, so I'm using the same 3-inch screws, and I'm setting this piece of wood in here that I retrofitted in here, and of course, as I said, I shimmed in on the other side to bump it out to the point that it's flush here. But I'm using the same exact 3-inch screws all the way down, so there's 4 of them here, and that's going to be a lot more stable. Also, the 3-inch screws I used for every single one of these holes for every single one of these. The normal screws that come with, let's see, that's the size. That's a very small screw, so that's not doing anything. All that's doing is holding the door in place. In fact, there's a couple of them here. So these are the hinge screws, and then this is what I came in with. So there's a 2x4 back there also. And so these 3-inch screws are literally going into that 2x4. It's going to be very, very difficult to kick this door in again with those screws. And of course, those screws got recessed also. Where's my tool at? This is what you recess the heads of the screws with. And as another stopgap measure, I have these lag bolts. These are, I think these are 5-inch lag bolts, 4.5-inch. Anyway, so these lag bolts, again, the weakest spot when somebody tries to kick in your door, you know, they're kicking up by the lock. You know, they get their foot up there by the lock. And it's very easy to pop this wood out of here. With these lag bolts, it's going to be virtually impossible. So these lag bolts will go in right above where the deadbolt is at. And you can tell, and I'm going to recess those heads in also. So you can tell these lag bolts are going to go into those 2x4s a good 2.5 inches. And I will do multiple lag bolts. So I think I'm going to do 4. There's going to be one right above the strike plate, one right below the strike plate, and I'll probably do one down here again. The reason I'm doing them down low is because unless you're Bruce Lee, you're not going to kick up this high. So I'm not too concerned about this top area, although you could put one in there for good measure if you wanted to. But besides these two here that I'm going to install, I'm also going to put one down here and probably one down here. That way, when the foot comes across here, they're banging against 4 of these going into a stud rather than the chintzy little screws that you saw earlier. So that's basically what I'm getting at. The other door that I have, I will probably put the other lag bolts. I think I bought 8 of these, or 6 of them. No, I bought 8. Somewhere there's an 8th one. There it is. So I'll probably put 4 in each door. 4 will go in that door for sure. As I said, 2 here, and then 2 down here, and then the front door is going to get 4 of these also, because although they didn't kick the front door in, that front door is still vulnerable. And I'm also going to retroactively put some 3-inch drywall screws, same as I did with this door. I'm going to put them in the other door, in both the hinges and into the strike plate areas, so that it's going to be very difficult to ever kick through that door again. This is going to save this little trick I was doing when I was in the apartment industry long time ago, and you would have really pissed off girlfriends or really pissed off boyfriends kick in a door. It was a kind of a common occurrence, and that's how I came up with this method of kind of retrofitting in the door frame, so that you don't have to buy a whole new door, you don't have to buy a whole new door jamb setup and everything. You're going to need a drill bit about the same size as your bolt, but you're not going to go all the way through. So with this drill bit, I'm going to mark my drill bit probably with a little bit of paint or something like that. I'm going to mark probably about here. So I want to go into my 2x4 just about 1/2 inch just to get a bite into my 2x4. Once that's done, I'll pull the drill bit out, and then I'll use this bolt going in here, and once it hits that bite, then it'll be very tough to get in, and then it'll continue to get tougher and tougher as it drives inside of that wood, and of course the head's going to be recessed in. And the reason I recess them in, you don't want the head showing, so eventually there'll be some wood putty or some caulking or something that goes over that, and the whole thing will get painted, and those screw heads will all disappear. And so what you're going to need is, where'd it go? Oh, the ratchet. It's going to be very difficult to drive that in to the wood, which is the whole point, and so you're going to need a ratchet. And you just screw it in until it bottoms out on that recess, and that's going to be the strongest door jamb that you're ever going to have. It's, as I said, it's a stopgap measure. If somebody really wanted to get in, and they had some type of, ram or something like that, yes, they could bust all those bolts and all those screws and all that stuff. But I guarantee the common burglar, the common guy that kicked in this door this time, will never be able to do this again. Impossible. Trust me. done. If you can see inside of there, probably can't because of the light, but the lag bolt literally goes into the 2x4 times 4. There's 4 of these lag bolts. I found a strike plate. There's a discrepancy on the edge of this door that is all the way down, starts at the bottom and comes upward. So there's enough room in here. I'm not really worried about getting these bolts flush. But if you wanted to, you could route out a little bigger of a circle. You could take a spade bit and you could actually get that recessed a little bit more so that you actually bury the head of that bolt all the way down. All 4 of these could get buried into the wood, and then wood putty can go over them just like on these. So I've moved over to the front door so that I can kind of show you a little better, cleaner way to do it. These are 3-inch drywall screws as I use in the front. This is a strike plate. These are the screws that came with the strike plate. So not only are the screws like really small, I mean the difference between these 2 little screws on that strike plate and somebody busting in your door and these 3-inch screws that literally go into the studs back there, that's humongous. If I did nothing else, if you do nothing else, that's a big deal right there. Because again, when somebody kicks in this bolt, the bolt is pushing up against this wood, and there's a very thin, as you saw before, all this is a 1x, and the 1x stops right there where I put my finger, and the 1x stops. So there's probably, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little better than 1/4 of an inch of wood back there. That's what they have to kick through. That wood and these 2 tiny little screws that were in here. That's all they need to do to bust into your house. So to shore it up, 3-inch screws and lag bolts, the same lag bolts I used before, and I use a spade bit, 3/4 inch spade bit, so I could route out and get the head recessed in there really good. And then this is the exact same thing I did up here, except that I used wood putty across there. That could be sanded off and painted. I'll put wood putty in there, sand it off and paint it eventually. And I still have 2 more of these guys that because this is a parameter I'm dealing with as far as the strength and where they're going to kick. They're going to kick right here, and they're going to kick down low like right here. And so it looks like they put some pretty sturdy screws in there. This is kind of weird. This is a different strike plate than I'm used to. So there's some sturdy screws in there, but still, this bottom plunger doesn't account for much. All your strength is up here. Having said that, there's still going to be another lag bolt down here, and then probably just a little bit lower, because when people kick, they're kicking what they think is the weakest spot, which is right in this area. Now will be the strongest spot.